If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?
Okay, let's talk about homework number 4, the wow factory. This is something I had a lot of fun designing, and I'm hoping this is a really fun lesson for you to work on. Cool. So let's check it out over in Illustrator. Here we have, this is kind of my first design of what I put together, and this is kind of the design that tells the story. The homework that I've actually going to give you, the Illustrator file, looks a little bit different. It looks like this, okay, because I wanted you to rig up these arms straight and not have to deal with them kind of bent. But when I designed this, I designed it like this so that I could have a sense of like what the story flow is. So I think this is actually the most instructive for telling you what you're going to animate, all right? So as you can see here, we have a little keyframe factory where robot arms produce keyframes and send them out for shipping, as you do. So the way this is going to work is this arm first is going to adjust this knob, okay? Possibly it starts at 0, that's up to you. I think it should eventually wind up at 50, but you know, it'll kind of slide up and down until it settles on, just say 50 or whatever you want it to be. And then when it's done, when it's picked a value, this arm will click down on this button on the stopwatch, right? Which I've actually built as a separate layer so it can kind of click down. That's the shadow and that there, and that's underneath the stopwatch. So when it pushes down, it goes behind it, right? And then what happens is that's how the keyframe is made, obviously. So in this little machine here, which by the way, I've left it so that you can animate these little knobs and dials here to make it like if you want to, like while this is deciding like where this slider goes or whatever. These move up and down, the yellow knobs, and these dials can rotate like that. Okay, so that's a little bit fun. But in any case, once the value is chosen and the stopwatch button is pressed, this keyframe wouldn't like be here. It would be kind of behind this, and it would slide out along this little like conveyor belt thing here. Okay, so from behind here that slides out, and then of course this arm reaches down and grabs it, and at the same time this arm here is reaching up and grabbing, I guess it's this box on the shelf here, and putting it down here. So this here is just a reference so you can see like, you know, where that should go, but actually that you'll delete in the animation because, so like I said, this arm reaches up, grabs this box, puts it down here, and then this arm has grabbed the keyframe and slides over. Remember, all these arms can move horizontally along these, you know, slots. This one can move up and down, obviously. So anyway, this arm moves over and drops the keyframe into the box that this one put down there, right? And then this arm finally picks that box up and dumps it on the pile of these sort of in the out box here, okay? So I think that's going to be like a really fun, kind of silly little animation for you to put together. And it's got lots of layers and lots of opportunities for you to use parenting and, you know, rigging up these robot arms, okay? Like I said, this is the way it's going to actually look in what you get, because I think it's just easier to rig these arms when they're straight. The only other note about this artwork is that this robot arm has a wider hand because it has to reach out and grab boxes, okay? And these all have smaller hands. This one actually, since it's just going to press, I think it should probably just like pinch together and press like that, like it's as one finger almost of the two, okay? Here we are in After Effects with the same file, right? And I do need to explain just a couple of things here. For one, if you look at the Wow Factory layers, you'll see that there's quite a lot, all right? And you can see that down here in the timeline as well. There's quite a lot. So you do really need to make sure that you kind of color code these things, especially the robot arms, which I've given kind of similar names to one another. So I think you definitely want to like make, you know, the first group like yellow or whatever. Just give them discrete colors so that you can tell at a glance like which ones are which and make sure that you have all the pieces kind of together. So I would definitely do that first, even before you do all the rigging, I think, just to make it all really clear. And then, like I said a little bit when we talked about it in Illustrator, so like this here is a reference, okay? So that's why it says box keyframe reference. That means that's something you're probably going to turn off or delete, right? But that's good for placement, if that's where you want it to be placed. And also there's one other reference here, which is the number 50, okay? Now, this I designed as Illustrator art, And I kind of had an idea that you could do this as like a simple little animation of these numbers. And when I say simple, I mean really simple here, okay? Because we talked about type, obviously, but we didn't really talk about, changing the value of those numbers, for example, or how that would animate. And that's slightly complicated. But I still think that when this knob adjusts up and down, I'd like to see these values change, okay? So I'm going to show you kind of a quickie way to do that. That's probably not the most pro, but I think it'll be kind of fun and instructive, all right? However, before I could show you that, you need to get this font, okay? Or I guess you could use something similar, but I wanted to tell you about a website that has a great font that's actually very much like this, and I think it would be a really good one to use, and it's free, okay? And it's open source, so that's awesome. Okay, so if you go to theleagueofmovabletype.com, all right? This is a great site that you should definitely know about and check out. And then there's a font here called League Gothic, all right? And that's the one that I used. And go ahead and download that and bring that into whatever font software you use for your machine. And then in After Effects, you can access that font. Back here in After Effects now, what I'd like to do is if you choose your type tool, okay, and click, just type the numbers 00, okay? Now, I already practiced this, so I've already found League Gothic, right, in here. This is just what I wanted. And I already made it the gray color, which, if it's not that color, just go ahead and use this eyedropper and, this is the gray color. So any of these gray masses you can choose from, right? The other thing that's really important here is to make sure that in paragraph, that the type is centered. It's centered text. If you don't remember where those are, you can always go up to window paragraph and window character. Okay. I think when you hit the type tool, though, that automatically opens. I think we went over this actually. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is I need to kind of make this the same size and place as the word 50 now. Okay. So I'm going to take the numbers, which is right here, and move this down on top of my 50 reference, okay? And additionally, I'm going to move this down, and I'm going to kind of try to line this anchor point up at the bottom there, and then I can just press S and scale this down until it's about right. Looks like about there, right? Okay, and now if I turn off the 50 reference, the only thing that's important here in terms of this placement is that the numbers kind of should be divided by this. There's a darker yellow here and a lighter yellow, and that kind of makes a center line. And I just want to make sure that the numbers are kind of centered on that because I'm OCD like most designers, right? So cool. So that's in place now. And now we can actually kind of animate this in a very specific way. Now this isn't going to be really great fluid animation. And in fact, I need to tell you about a different kind of keyframe that's actually you need to know about in order to do this animation. Because you can, we didn't do this in the animation oatmeal example, but if you twirl down this little tab for your type, and instead of looking at the transform properties, we look at the text here. There's a thing called source text, which you can actually make a keyframe for. So, when you make that keyframe, though, it's going to have this unfamiliar square shape, okay? And that's what's known in After Effects as a hold keyframe. Teacher's note, I'm pausing the video for 1 second because I think I could do a slightly better job explaining something. When you make a source text keyframe like I just did, it always is a hold keyframe. There's no such thing as quote-unquote normal or linear source text keyframes. Anytime you press that stopwatch for source text, it makes a hold keyframe. Okay, and I need to explain this to you now because we've only talked about the normal kind of keyframes, which are also called linear keyframes. But let's talk about hold keyframes for 1 second, okay? A hold keyframe, here I've set up a little example of here, let me delete these out. I've just made a little example of over 1 second that this white square just moves across the screen here, right? This is, everything that you know about already, right? And what I did is I made this I made this 30 frames, and what I wanted to do is go 10 frames and make a keyframe here that sets that there, and go 10 more frames and make another keyframe here. Now, this didn't change the animation at all. It looks the exact same as it did before. I just wanted to make a bunch of keyframes here to demonstrate this, okay? If I were to select all these keyframes and right-click on any one of those, I could go down here in this menu to toggle hold keyframe. Now, the word toggle is not like a normal English word that anybody ever uses, I don't think, but it just means to turn on and turn off like a light switch. It's like a binary thing. It's either on 100% or it's off 100%. So keyframes could either be hold or non-hold, but they can't sort of be between, right? So it's toggling it, right? When I do that, it makes it kind of that same square shape, although slightly different. It's got like a diamond end and a square end. But don't worry, they're all the same kinds of hold keyframes, right? And now what this means is instead of interpolating between these points, right? Instead of After Effects, going between the keyframes and creating the animation like we're used to, now it looks like this, right? There's no interpolation between the keyframes. Literally, they're called hold keyframes because they hold this value of whatever that keyframe is until it encounters another keyframe. And then it just changes all at once when it hits that keyframe. So it holds the value until it encounters another keyframe and then it changes it. And these, for example, they don't all need to be hold keyframes. So if I would have to command click on this to turn this back to linear keyframes. So now there could be like a hold keyframe and then animation and then it holds again, right? So you can have mixed hold and non-hold keyframes in one animation. It's not that big a deal. The shortcut, if you don't want to do that, right click and hold toggle hold keyframe is if you hold Option and Command and you click on highlighted keyframes, you turn them into hold keyframes. So that was Option and Command, right? At least on Mac. So now it looks like this again. So hold keyframes are actually really, really useful when you want things to just pop around on screen, or for example, with these numbers, if you want the numbers to change, but we don't have a really elegant way of like changing it from 0 to 50 so that it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? We don't have that. That's sort of advanced, but we can use hold keyframes on these values to kind of fake it, all right? So before I do that, let me just show that if we have the this knob, okay? And I'm going to hit P to show the position of this. And if I like move this up to just say 0, and I'm going to just do like a quick animation here where to 20 frames and it moves down to just say 75, okay, and then 10 more frames. And let's see, it's got a pause, so let me put a pause in there. I copied and pasted that, and let me go now 10 more frames and move this back to 50, all right? So just say, the animation looks like this. Boop, boop, okay? Not that great. I'm sure you could do a way better job with it, but for now, this will serve, okay? So these keyframes start at 0. And if I go here, I can now, follow with me, all right? I could double-click this, like we did with our type, and I could type 75, right? And now, if I click out of that, of course, it's a hold keyframe, so it's going to stay at 0 until it reaches this point of 75, right? And then it clicks, right? But what we could do is kind of fake this a little bit and say like, around here, it's like around 25, right? So I could double click this and make a 25 type hold keyframe, right? And then when it gets to about here, it's about 50. So I could double click this and type 50, right? And now I've created an animation that looks like this. Right? So and let me pull back a little because we're really close to that. Right? So we're kind of like faking it to look a little bit like it's counting. And let me go ahead and just like complete this just to see what this would look like. So 75 is being held, so we don't need another keyframe there because with hold keyframes, this whole idea of like a pause here is unnecessary because it's just holding, right? Sort of pre-paused, if you will. So now when this rolls down, just say to like here, it goes to 50, right? Right there. So let's double click this and type 50. And what we can do to make this a little bit finer is we can go in between these keyframes to here, for example. Now this is 0 and this is 25. So this is around 12, let's just say. So we can double click this and make this say 12, right? And we can go to like here between 25 and 50. So that would be around 37, right? We're basically adding 12 onto these values, right? And then in between here and here, it's it's 62, right? It took me a second to do that math, all right? So 62, and essentially now let's check this out. And you can see like the more of these hold keyframes you put in here, the more it's just going to look like a fluid animation of it clicking up. So, in a way, you are creating like a pretty sophisticated animation here, right? So I'm not going to do that whole thing for you, but I think you can see now how that might work, right? So go ahead and get that font and try this out. I think this is a really fun method, right? I think everything else here should be fairly self-explanatory based on the lecture that I gave. Like I said, these can all move up and down. The real trick is going to be like getting these things to really reach out and grab and finding the right, positions and everything for these. But I think you can have a lot of fun with it, and I think this will make a really cool project. So go for it, give it a shot, make it as best as you can, and just try to have fun with it. All right? Thank you very much.
If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?